Hello, everybody. Jan Rutherford here with Self-Reliant Leadership. Really happy that you're joining me today. And if you're not, you're probably watching this on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. Welcome. This is the first of 13 sessions that we're doing over the next 3 months in anticipation of launch. Um, and there was an echo there. Sorry about that. Um, but we're launching our book, and that comes out August 20th. So, in anticipation of that, what we're going to do is I've recorded out on past Crucible expeditions with military veterans and executives. I've recorded a number of videos out there that correspond to each chapter. And with regard to each chapter, we're also going to have a guest that was on various crucibles over the past 10 years. We've had over 250 people join us. So, hey, if while we're getting ready, if you could put in the comments where you're dialing in from, that would be fantastic. The other thing I will put in there is a link to the book. If you're interested in pre-ordering that, I'll put that in there right now. And while you're posting and putting where you're calling in from, I'm gonna play a little video that we recorded back about last year. And we'll just take a few minutes it's about a 2-minute video. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. Here it goes. Jan Rutherford here, and my co-author, Jackie Jordan, is not, but our book, Becoming a Self-Reliant Leader, is about to come out. We're super excited about it. The subtitle is How Grit and Disciplined Duty Forge Indomitable Teams. We're out here on our 22nd Crucible, which is an expedition with military veterans and executives, and it's all about slowing down to speed up. And in this book, what we've tried to do is gather all the lessons we've learned over the years on these expeditions from veterans that have led when life and death matters, and executives who have led through the pandemic and extraordinary challenges and crises. And we're trying to bring those lessons together in 3 pillars. One is about leading yourself, which is really about grit, perseverance, and determination. The other pillar is leading others, which is really about disciplined duty, a duty to one another where there's shared accountability. And the last is about leading the organization, one of the hardest things to do, which is to leverage the levers of structure, people, process, and incentives to change the environment. Now, we're out here in an absolutely stunning environment. We're in Dominguez Canyon of Colorado, and this whole idea of becoming a self-reliant leader is about being squared away. That you've got yourself squared away physically, mentally, emotionally, maybe spiritually, so that you're at a point where you've got your energy and you can generate energy in other people. So this book is really about not that there's ever an end when it comes to leadership. It's about the beginning, becoming a self-reliant leader. And there's no recipe, there's no structure for what it takes to be a leader. It's a lifelong pursuit. But what we hope to do in this book, through our lessons we've learned out here, is provide the framework by which you can become a self-reliant leader. And hopefully that you enjoyed that beautiful scenery of Dominguez Canyon. And I'm hoping that, and because I'll be out there in a couple weeks, hopefully that snow has melted and it's spectacular water flowing. So let me get into a couple points I wanted to make. And again, if you have any questions at all, just throw them in the chat and I'll address those. There's a little bit of delay between the live feed and the chat, so there might be a little bit of a pause. But your questions are absolutely more than welcome. So, one of the things I alluded to in that video was really talking about self-reliant leadership. What does it take? And I think of it as really three pillars. One is leading yourself, that you have to be squared away. You have to take personal ownership in your leadership journey. And a lot of what's required is what you would see in that video is a little bit of grit, a little bit of persistence and determination. And I've been talking to a lot of leaders in the past week about this whole idea of just discipline, that the whole concept that if you're going to take on more responsibility, you have to be squared away spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, because when you take on more responsibility, you're going to be called to sacrifice your time. You're not going to be able to work the same amount of hours if you're a leader with a lot of responsibility that you did before. So you've got to really take care of yourself. You've got to be squared away because you are going to be called on to serve other people. So that's the first pillar is this taking ownership. And most leaders would love it if everybody on their team took personal responsibility and ownership for their own development. And in organizations, what we hope to do is provide a vessel, an environment where people can really grow and develop and learn and develop mastery. And that comes to the second pillar, which is leading others. And I used to have underneath leading others accountability, and I've changed it to expectations, because accountability takes about 2 seconds. Either you did it or you didn't. Either it's up to the quality standard or it's not. And what I found myself asking leaders oftentimes when they complain about someone who's not performing is, were you clear with regard to the expectations of how people are supposed to behave according to core values and the production, the results, the efficiency, the safety, whatever the metric is. It's both the behaviors and the results. And what we really want is people to feel a sense of duty, that, boy, I don't want to let anyone down, that they're committed versus just merely compliant. And that's really hard to do. As a music conductor once said to me, a great orchestra doesn't play with each other. A great orchestra plays for each other. So that's something to think about, is leading others. And the last pillar is leading the organization, where we really need to create alignment across all the departments and divisions, and so that there's clarity and focus. And that clarity is about the mission, that clarity is about roles, and that focus is really about what are you going to say no to, because you can't do everything, and you know, time is finite. So those are the three pillars. And from my experience being on the leadership podcast with Jim Vasilopoulos as my co-host, we've heard from a number of, you know, really interesting people over the years. And when it comes to leading self, I recall Simon Sinek saying, it's the journey, it's the journey, it's the journey. It's not the destination. And I think that's the part we have to embrace, that at the end of the day, we are all a work in progress. When it comes to the second pillar, leading others, I'm reminded of what Tom Rath said, who wrote Strength to Strength. He said, you know, a lot of it might seem like it's navel gazing. It's all about you. He said, but what we really wrote the book for is for people to realize it their duty to find strengths in other people. When we interviewed Ron Carucci, he basically said, hey, there's two questions no one should ever ask in an organization. Do I matter? And do I belong? And, you know, again, if we're showing appreciation for people, we're catching people doing things right more than we're catching people doing things wrong, then they're not going to ask those questions. And, you know, when we interviewed Horst Schulte from the Ritz-Carlton, he reminded us that everybody might have a different function, but everybody has the same purpose. And, you know, that is really about, you know, keeping and finding new clients. When we interviewed Stan McChrystal, he talked about, you know, a great team has a common purpose and trust. And that purpose is really get and keep customers. It is that. And if we're doing all the right things, you know, that people will find value in what we're doing. We will keep our customers and we'll get new ones. The last one is leading the organization. And when I'm reminded of Zoe Chance from Yale University, who said the magic question is always, what would it take to blank? And what's great about that question, it doesn't say how will we, where people start looking at the pros and the cons. It allows people to be aspirational. You know, what would it take to accomplish this? What would it take to make up for the fact that we haven't hit our numbers all year long? What would it take? And then once you start brainstorming those answers, it's really about getting rid of all the things that are things that you don't have direct control or influence over. And then lastly, when we interviewed Margaret Heffernan around the beginning of the pandemic, she talked about, you know, the hard thing to balance these days is adaptability and efficiency, because they're contrary. Adaptability is creative, you're going to move on a dime. That efficiency comes from discipline and order, and the leader of today really has to balance those two. So that's really a lot of what we focused on in the book. At the end of each chapter, we really tried to highlight, hey, if we talked about selection, you know, how's that relate to leading self? How does it relate to leading others? How does it relate to leading the organization? So we tried to recap it that way every single chapter. And and when it comes to leading self, that ownership piece, that part I've talked about being squared away, we're always reminded that there are two things that we ultimately control: our time and how we respond to our environment. If we do a good job of that, we can influence other people. Of course, we don't control other people. And what takes us off the task of being in charge of what we control is our circle of concern, all the things that we have no influence and no control over. And again, when we focus, that's when we are aligned and when we can accomplish great things as an organization. And I'm sort of reminded of one of our participants in Patagonia who reminded the team the whole time we were circumnavigating Mount Fitzroy and Serratore, you know, hey, if you want to go fast, you go by yourself, you go alone. If you want to go far, we go together. And next week, at May 9th at 12 o'clock East Coast time, we're going to have Al Paxton. He's the Chief People Officer from Encore Electric. He's been on, I think, 3 crucibles with us. He's a military veteran, and we're going to talk about selection and what it means to select the right people versus the best people. And before I go, I've got one more video I want to show you that comes from one of our trips. It kind of outlines the book a little bit and what these sessions are really all about. What I realized out in environments like this, when people are a little bit cold, wet, tired, and hungry, it reveals character. This book really started a long time ago when I was in the Army as a soldier. And what can happen out here is accelerated compared to what can happen when we look at traditional ways that we develop leaders. Because out here, no one has anything to prove, protect, or promote. It's naturally a safe environment. What also happens out here is there is a little bit of adversity. Today happens to be exceptionally beautiful, but the adversity will come. Later today, we're going to climb up a big mesa, and it's going to be a steep climb with heavy backpacks. Yeah. And we're going to see people that are going to be slow and tired and sore and hurting, and there's going to be other people that step up and help them. So the whole idea here is that the crucible, a severe test in which people are changed, is something that really can develop leaders. And the lessons out here aren't just about wilderness and backpacking and doing hard things physically. The lessons are really about how we communicate, how we decide, how we resolve conflict, how we come together and meet and collaborate. So this book is really all about the different phases that happen out here that parallel exactly what happens in the work world. I want you to reflect on all the crucibles you've had in your life, the adversity, and how those severe tests have actually prepared you and have made you stronger. Remember that when you create your own crucible, when you experience severe tests, you actually change the narrative for yourself and for your team. And that's the two videos that we wanted to show. And as I mentioned, next week, May 9th, we'll have Al Paxton. That'll be session 2 of 13. And what we'll do is we'll take one chapter of the book each and every week. We'll have a video for that chapter that was filmed out on one of the Crucible expeditions. And we'll have someone that, whether they're a military veteran or an executive, a past participant, that'll join me and entertain questions and kind of provide their perspective. And what we tried to do with each chapter is basically take people through what happens on a crucible and how there's an exact parallel to what happens on teams. And as the subtitle of our book is, how grit, persistence and determination, and disciplined duty forge indomitable teams. And I can't think of a leader out there that I'm working with that isn't trying to create a high-performing team. And we know right now that maybe 33% of employees these days are engaged. And oftentimes I hear people complain about generations or whatever. But we also had a really interesting psychologist on the podcast recently, Preston Klein from Wharton. And he basically said, hey, this has been a leader's duty all along. You get what you get. And if people quitting after a year or two, that's not because of them. That's because they haven't been inspired. They haven't had great leadership. They haven't developed and grown and developed some sort of mastery. The leader hasn't helped them find purpose and meaning in what they do. And what I'm seeing and what I think is really the true aspiration these days is that, we can trade time for money. We can make work all about a transaction. But at the end of the day, if you're working, if someone's paying you money, they're paying you to help some other people, whether you're collecting trash, you're a housekeeper in a hotel, whether you're at a restaurant, whether you're a white collar accountant, whether you're a construction worker or a mid-level manager. At the end of the day, I think it's up to us. I think it's up to our personal responsibility to find real purpose and meaning. And the best leaders and the best mentors I've ever had have always asked me repeatedly, Jan, what's a good life? And the only answer they've ever accepted is it's one lived in the service of other people. And so, I think, hey, you can trade time for money and you can have a job and you can go to work. But, this book is really about leaders that are trying to serve the greater good, their community, their industry, their company, other people. I had an opportunity recently to go to an old Army post that I served at a long time ago. And that Army post is basically being given back to the state of California, to companies and homes and neighborhoods and subdivisions. And it was interesting when I looked at where I used to work a long time ago, and I said to my wife, it's like they've erased our history. And she said, well, you could look at it that way, but think about what you and all those other leaders did way back then. You helped these families. You helped these soldiers and their families grow and learn, and they're out there doing other things now. And those families are all grown up. And who knows what sort of impact you had, all those different leaders had. And I thought, that's sort of the bottom line. At the end of the day, when we look back at what we did, we don't necessarily say, hey, did I hit my quarterly numbers? We think about the relationships we had with fellow employees, colleagues, partners, customers, all those. And hopefully those things endure, even if the buildings don't. So that's what I'll leave you with. And as a reminder, May 9th with Al Paxton, and I hope you can join us. And if you like this video, I hope you'll share this via YouTube or LinkedIn with some other people you think would benefit from it. And in the meantime, we will see you next week. And thank you. Have a great week and a great weekend.